1 minute. 40. Ha! Ha! Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. The big stories tonight. A Facebook ban is unlikely. That's the assurance of the palace, even as the president lashed out at the social media giant for taking down pages linked to the police and the military. President Duterte, meanwhile, wants to shake the tree over at PhilHealth. He is threatening again to abolish the state insurer. After going without infection for nearly 7 months, Batanes has logged its first COVID-19 infection. The province wants their islands placed under ECQ. The World Bank sees 2 million Filipinos sliding back into poverty as the pandemic takes a toll on livelihoods. And another grim milestone as the pandemic drags on, COVID-19 deaths have reached 1 million worldwide. That's one person succumbing to the virus every 16 seconds. Let's begin with the palace allaying fears that President Duterte will consider any ban on Facebook in the country. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque says the president is only after talks with the social media giant over its terms and policies. Here's the big story.
President Rodrigo Duterte, in his Monday night address, slammed social media giant Facebook for taking down accounts and pages linked to the advocacies of the Philippine military and police. He says Facebook is pointless if it fails to help the government.
You know, Facebook insurgency is about overturning government. What would be the point, I said before, in my eyes, what would be the point of allowing you to continue if you cannot help us?
The page Hands Off Our Children was taken down for alleged coordinated inauthentic behavior. Supported by the AFP, the page is owned by a group of parents campaigning against the New People's Army's youth recruitment. The president now wants to talk it out with Facebook to discuss its policies.
You cannot lay down a policy for my government. I allow you to operate here. You cannot bar or prevent me from espousing the objectives of government.
Some Facebook users are worried that Duterte's words might mean banning Facebook in the country.
Kapag nawala po yung Facebook is, hindi ko na may share by online yung Word of God by sa mga Bible, sa mga tsaka yung business ko po is mahinto.
Kasi doon lang po tayo kumbaga makakapag-communicate lalo na sa mga kamag-anak nating malalayo. Kumbaga, so doon na lang natin sila makakapiling through sa Facebook.
But the palace clarifies, no, Facebook will not be banned, nor will freedom of expression be curtailed. Spokesperson Harry Roque said Duterte only wants to discuss possible policy changes on Facebook.
Yung founder ng Facebook mismo, talagang sinasabi niya na marami talagang malawakang reforma ang kinakailangan nilang gawin. No? Sinabi nga niya minsan, baka nga kinakailangan magkaroon ng kahit papaanong regulasyon sa Facebook. No? At kinakailangan ma-identify talaga nila kung sino talaga yung mga actors sa Facebook. So ito po ay usapin na nangyayari sa buong daigdig.
Roque, for one, questioned Facebook's choice of fact-checkers.
Bakit kapag pabor sa gobyerno, tinatanggal? Kapag pabor sa oposisyon, hindi tinatanggal, no? Bakit ang fact-checkers laban sa gobyerno? Sino pa dito sa bayan na ito ang magdududa na ang Rappler at ang Vera Files ay talaga namang kontra sa administrasyon ni Presidente Duterte.
The AFP supports the call to continue talks with Facebook. They are also requesting for the list of purged accounts allegedly linked to the military.
So that we will be aided by it in our validation and in our investigation and imposition of penalties when warranted, specifically if the posts violated our existing AFP social media policy and use.
Social media expert Carlo Ople explained that Facebook, being a private company, is governed by its own policies. But a third-party team can be summoned for evaluation and policy improvement, just as they did in the past.
I think they recruited several high-profile former journalists to government officials to take a look at their policies and their content. And if I'm not mistaken, there's like even a counter, like a third-party board that's going to also investigate and always be noisy every time Facebook does something wrong. So, ang dami nang tumitingin sa kanila. So,
Meanwhile, cybercrime law expert attorney J.J. Dicini said the government can in fact regulate Facebook in the Philippines.
I think you can regulate, kasi pwede yan, spectrum yan. Pwedeng you can regulate. Pwedeng ano rin, ang gagawin mo, instead na mag-regulate ka, mag-accountability na lang. Have a local presence para meron kaming mapupuntahan.
This, he says, will help establish accountability, especially when cybercrime is committed.
President Duterte renewed his threat to abolish PhilHealth and replace it with a privatized agency. But how does that sit with the state insurers' employees? Marian Enriquez tells us in this big story.
President Rodrigo Duterte on Monday said he will start shaking the tree in PhilHealth and bared his plan to reorganize and impose a single line of authority. This as the state-run health insurer continues to be hounded by allegations of corruption.
Hindi na pwede na itong mga tao na ito, they're already entrenched na. Walang mayari. Talagang either I'm going to revamp, consider everybody resign there.
The chief executive said he plans to push through with his earlier suggestion to abolish PhilHealth. He noted, however, that he prefers the replacement of PhilHealth with a new agency, but privatizing it would not be possible due to insufficient government funds.
I'm going to propose to Congress to abolish the... Kung i-privatize mo naman, sus Maria Josep, walang pera. Sino insurance mo? Kung sabihin ng mga kapitalista sa insurance, kami ang magbayad, pero wala kayong pundo.
But while PhilHealth Workers for Hope, Integrity, Transparency, and Empowerment understands the President's position, the rank-and-file union appeals to be spared from abolition.
Ang hinihiling lang namin, dapat sana patapusin muna yung investigasyon. At yung ilang mga opisyal sa PhilHealth na talagang may kasalanan na maparusahan.
Habay further noted that they cooperated in the investigation and divulged everything they knew about the alleged corruption in the agency. He said the abolition will be unfair for rank-and-file employees and other 7,000 workforce that will be affected.
Okay kami sa reorganization, but the abolition medyo mahabang usapin ho ito.
The corruption allegations stemmed from a whistleblower who revealed that the PhilHealth Executive Committee pocketed some 15 billion funds through several fraudulent schemes. Duterte then approved the filing of graft and malversation charges against resigned PhilHealth President and CEO Ricardo Morales, along with several other officials. In a statement, spokesperson Ray Balenya said PhilHealth respects President Duterte's views on the issue. He added that the state insurer will continue to do its mandate, especially as the country grapples with the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, Malacanang spokesperson Harry Roque earlier today said he will be meeting with new PhilHealth Chief Dante Gueran to get updates on the reforms being implemented in the agency. For News 5, Marian Enriquez. We are One News.
Following President Duterte's remark that he is contemplating resigning from his post due to perennial problems with corruption, Senator Panfilo Lacson says stepping down does not solve anything either. In a statement, Lacson said it would be better if the president channels his attention to just making sure corruption laws apply to all. President Duterte had spoken of his trust towards PhilHealth Secretary Francisco Duque, who for the time being had been excluded from the list of officials recommended to be charged for the PhilHealth mess. Palace spokesman Harry Roque, on the other hand, downplayed Duterte's latest resignation pronouncement, saying the chief executive will continue to fight corruption while in office.
Well, let's just say he's serious about his expression of exasperation. Seryoso siya kasi pikam-pika na po siya sa korupsyon.
The president on Monday evening announced the quarantine status for various parts of the country beginning next month. The National Capital Region will still be under general community quarantine until October 31. Areas under GCQ include Batangas, the cities of Tacloban, Bacolod, Iligan, and Iloilo. Meanwhile, the president approved the recommendation of the Interagency Task Force to revert Lanao del Sur, including Marawi, to modified enhanced community quarantine. The rest of the country will be under MGCQ. But that does not include the island province of Batanes. The province will be under ECQ starting tomorrow until October 13. This comes after the islands logged their first COVID-19 case in almost 7 months of being virus-free. A locally stranded individual who arrived in Batanes last September 22 had tested positive for the disease. The patient is asymptomatic and is now under strict quarantine at the Batanes resort. We'll pause for a quick break. When the big story returns. The holiday season might bring with it some cheer. After all, researchers from UP say it's possible for cases in NCR to go down to 100 daily by December. But before that happens, buses will have to be strictly monitored. Provincial routes will once again be allowed to operate starting tomorrow. The details on that next. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. 9 in every 10 Filipinos are still worried that a family member could get infected with COVID-19. The latest SWS poll show that 85% of more than 1,200 Filipinos surveyed had expressed fears of contracting COVID-19. 63% worry a great deal, 22% are somewhat worried, only 6% have no worries at all. But there might be less reason to worry. UP Octa research fellow Guido David says it's possible that come December, NCR will only tally 100 new cases per day. This after the Metro had seen a 50% reduction in new infections. And while the president has decided to extend the effectivity of quarantine status for a month, David, in an interview with 1PH sa Totoo Lang, said he prefers a 15-day review of quarantine measures.
least 15 days lang naman. Let's take it one step at a time. Parang hindi tayo, isang one time na, sabi na natin GCQ sa hanggang November. Pwede naman bumilis yung trajectory. Pwedeng more than 50% yung mabawas. That would be better, di ba? And then maybe we could actually relax the quarantine earlier than yung projection natin.
PITX is preparing for the arrival of more passengers tomorrow as some provincial buses will be back on the road. And for those who frequently ride buses flying the EDSA Carousel route, time to buy a beep card as government mandates its usage starting this Thursday. Gerard De La Peña tells us more.
After months of being absent on the road, the green light is finally on for provincial buses to operate starting Wednesday. Trips from San Fernando, Pampanga will end at the Araneta City Bus Terminal, while buses from Batangas, Cavite, and Laguna are designated at the Parañaque Integrated Terminal Exchange. PITX has augmented its manpower for the expected influx of passengers. On average, about 40,000 passengers use PITX daily during the quarantine, a far cry from its daily foot traffic of 70,000 pre-pandemic and its 120,000 capacity.
Ito yung isang welcome problem, Masaya naman tayo at bumalik na unti-unti yung sigla ng land transportation. Ang ating terminal naman ay handa na mas marami pang crowd.
But bus operators aren't expecting passengers to come in droves on the first day, as passengers have to bring numerous documents such as valid ID, travel authority from the PNP, and a written consent for COVID testing and quarantine.
Single document, hindi dala ng pasahero, hindi pwede isakay. Very strict sila doon. So, mangyari niyan, siguro September 30, hindi pa masyado mapasahero yan, pero pwede na magsimula.
Reservations must also be made 2 days before the trip so as to help in contact tracing.
Dahil syempre may ipapasok na silang mga datos at yun ay ating kakalapin for contact tracing purposes po. Kaya mas minabuti po natin na at least 2 days before ay mag-book na po sila bago po sila babiyahe.
As public transportation is slowly eased, an expert from the UP Octa Research Group told the chiefs that provincial buses must be monitored closely.
The caseload is still high, the virus is still here, and if we're not careful, we might be transporting carriers all over the country through provincial bus lines.
Meanwhile, commuters riding buses plying the EDSA Carousel route will be required to use beep cards starting Thursday. This as the government pushes for cashless payments.
As part of DOTR's concern din na hindi dapat lumawak yung hawaan sa COVID-19. So we decided na maging effective ng October 1st, mandatory na kung wala kang beep card, hindi ka makakasakay.
A beep card costs 150 pesos, inclusive of a 50 peso joining fee and a 100 peso load for fares. For News 5, Gerard De La Peña, we are One News.
And here are the other big stories today. House Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano and Marinduque Representative Lord Alan Velasco are expected to meet this evening at the Palace to discuss their term-sharing deal. The two will be accompanied by party leaders and coalition allies, and a source says these include Majority Leader Martin Romualdez and Deputy Speakers L.A. Villafuerte, Raneo Abu, and Rodante Marcoleta. In one PA sa totoo lang, Villafuerte slammed Velasco, saying the lawmaker has not been an active member of Congress for the past 15 months. He even went as far as calling Velasco a lazy lawmaker.
Hindi po ibig sabihin na speaker in waiting ka or presumptive speaker that you do not earn the trust of congressmen. After nagkaroon ng agreement, hindi na siya nagpakita. Missing in action. So, sabi ng tao, how can this guy be speaker? We can't even talk to him. We don't know where he stands on certain issues.
The Anti-Money Laundering Council has told the court that detained Senator Leila de Lima was not involved in any transactions for the illegal drug trade inside the Bilibid prison. According to Dilima's lawyer, AMLAC investigator Artemio Baculi admitted that the senator was not among those being probed for the trade due to lack of evidence. Dilima is facing 3 separate cases for allegedly facilitating a drug trade inside the national prison during her term as Justice Secretary. Government officials are pushing through with the pre-registration process for the national ID system starting next month. The National Economic Development Authority is targeting to have 5 million pre-registers coming from 32 provinces nationwide. These include Ilocos Sur, La Union, Cagayan, Zambales, Nueva Ecija, and Quezon, among others. Some provinces in Visayas and Mindanao, such as Albay, Iloilo, Bohol, Compostela Valley, and Tawi-Tawi are also included. NEDA says the following provinces have been chosen due to low incidence of COVID-19. Pre-registration activities do not yet involve biometrics so as to prevent virus transmission.
We'll just be collecting information on social demographics. Okay? So wala mo nang pagkuha ng fingerprints and the biometrics, the iris scan, because requiring this biometric collection of this biometric information will mean that the individuals will have to go to the testing centers. So delikado kasi magkakaroon ng congregation, ganyan, and they will have to, pwedeng maging spreader kasi siya.
After a hefty budget cut in the DOST's research and development segment, senators are now worried this could impact the country's capacity to respond to natural disasters. Mean Los Baños has this report.
PHIVOLCS has listed down 4 volcanoes that have been showing abnormal activities. These are the Taal Volcano, Mayon, Bulusan in Sorsogon, and Canlaon in Negros. PHIVOLCS said that although Taal's activities have declined in the past months, they saw some slight changes in its trend recently.
Paghupa po ng pamamaga because of pressure, and nakita na namin na namamaga ulit. So we have to continuously monitor it. The Mayon volcano also is slightly, again, inflating from its base. So we have to watch out these 2 volcanoes.
Senator Joel Villanueva expressed worry that the monitoring of active volcanoes may be affected after the PHIVOLCS requested budget was slashed by 133 million pesos. Solidum said the monitoring will proceed, but their information technology system and modernization of stations will be affected.
As you know, many of the monitoring systems now are directly supported by IT. So even if you have sensors, this will be operated, maintained, and evaluated using IT equipment.
The Budget Department has previously allocated 23.89 billion pesos for the DOST. But even senators said the funds for the research and development is not enough, especially because it was also cut by 76 million pesos. They commit to increase the budget to maintain the projects and provide continuous support for homegrown scholars and scientists. With this, the Senate asked the DOST to provide them with a list of priority R&D programs so they can amend its budget allocation.
Ang laki din ho ng binawas pa din dun sa R&D nyo. Na parang ang dating nga hindi na-appreciate ata ng DBM ang research and development.
For Senator Panfilo Lacson, the DOST should also have an influence in deciding which research programs across the government should be prioritized. DOST Secretary Fortunato de la Peña agreed, provided that the budget for research will not be lumped into the agency, but will also be distributed to different departments. Senators also asked the agency to prioritize the clinical trials of possible vaccines and make sure they're all proven safe prior to the distribution. Reporting for News 5, Mean Los Baños, we are One News.
Time for another break. When the big story returns, the World Bank sees some 2 million Filipinos sliding back into poverty as the pandemic leads to massive unemployment. And fatalities due to COVID-19 hit a troubling milestone with more than 1 million deaths worldwide. More of the details next. Welcome back. You're watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. It might be harvest season, but farmers are having second thoughts about selling their palay, as this would mean selling at a loss. The reason for the grain's price depreciation in this report by Shaila Francisco.
It's already the start of harvest season, but Roberto has yet to glean majority of the palay in this farm in Isabela. He is worried over the continuous drop in the value of palay, now priced at only 12 pesos a kilo. Left with no choice, he had to sell some of his early produce at this price.
Siyempre ma'am, paano naman kung hindi namin ibibinta, hindi namin may susauli yung pinagkukuhanan namin ng gastos namin. Siyempre, kita pa rin ma'am.
Over in Nueva Ecija, farmers are already calling on the Agriculture Department for help. They say current prices are not enough to recover production costs, especially with more expensive palay inputs. In Mindoro, farmers trooped to the National Food Authority to sell palay at 19 pesos a kilo, but this they fear won't last long.
Talagang tatakot kami na baka bumaba pa, no? Pero ang talagang na lang namin, pampalakas ng loob, yung support price ng government.
According to the Federation of Free Farmers, up to 1.5 million farmers are affected by the falling prices of palay. During the start of harvest season, palay is usually priced at least 15 pesos per kilo. But now, some traders buy the harvest at 10 pesos a kilo.
Although hindi naman ganun karami ang imports, pero marami rin ang pumapasok pa rin, mukhang naniniguro by buying at a relatively low price para kung sakaling bumaha na naman yung imports, hindi na sila malulugi. Meron din mga naririnig kong mga spekulasyon na humina daw yung benta ng bigas dahil sa pandemic. Siguro i-verify natin yan.
Farmer groups have launched an online petition to ask the government to help boost palay prices. Senate President Pro Tempore Ralph Rector urged the DA to probe the matter as current palay prices are even cheaper than face masks, worth 200 to 500 pesos per box. Senator Kiko Pangilinan meanwhile appealed to government agencies to buy farmers' produce. The DA assures that the NFA is willing to buy more palay from farmers.
NFA has to be mobilize and gagawin po nila yung rollover scheme. 10 billion ay may multiplier effect na pwede sila makabili na 20 billion pesos worth of palay.
The DA says they are already in talks with cooperatives and LGUs to buy palay at competitive prices. Shaila Francisco, VR1 News.
Around 2 million Filipinos could slide back into poverty this year due to COVID-19. That's according to estimates made by the World Bank. Poverty rate in the country could rise to 20.5% this year, the World Bank says, and 22% next year, and that could erase gains made over the past 5 years. There will be what the World Bank calls the new poor, or those unable to maintain a living as unemployment surges. The World Bank also expects the Philippine economy to shrink by as much as 9.9% this year. The multilateral lenders' base contraction outlook of 6.9% is also deeper than that as government's projection. The World Bank notes that while the government's cash transfer program for poor families had been helpful, inadequate systems and infrastructure made it hard to reach target beneficiaries. Water allocation from Angat Dam for domestic and irrigation uses will be reduced. The question is, will this affect water supply for the rest of the year? Shaila Francisco finds out.
The water level in Angat Dam is still below its minimum operating level of 180 meters. It is currently at 177.94 meters. The National Water Resources Board, or NWRB, further reduced the water allocation for Metro Manila as well as for irrigation to ensure enough supply until the end of the year. Irrigation allocation for October will be cut by 5 cubic meters per second, while allocation for Maynilad and Manila Water will be down by 2 cubic meters per second in the same month. The water concessionaires are assuring their customers that this will not have any impact on supply. They said water interruption in some areas were only caused by maintenance activities. The concessionaires added that there are still alternative sources of water as of now.
Naka-standby yung ating mga deep well facilities, no? So currently almost 70 million liters per day ang deep wells natin, na by the end of the year hopefully around 90 to 95 million liters per day ito. Meron din tayong Cardona Water Treatment Plant na we plan to maximize hanggang 100 million liters per day. This is actually in preparation also for summer and in preparation also just in case na there will be further reduction.
Meanwhile, disconnection policy of the Metropolitan Water Works and Sewerage System, or MWSS, ends tomorrow. With this, the regulator is advising customers who have not settled their ECQ bills to submit promissory notes to their concessionaires. This will extend their payment deadlines to up to 6 months. MWSS Chief Regulator Patrick T says they are studying if they could provide another grace period.
The MWSS RO has already transmitted a letter to the two concessionaires to comment or to submit to the regulatory office what are their plans to comply with the terms and conditions of the Bayanihan Law or the Bayanihan 2. They have submitted their response last night, so we are still studying it. We will still review the submissions of the two concessionaires and we will determine probably by tomorrow.
He added that both Maynilad and Manila Water have committed not to immediately cut connection lines and give at least 15 days of extension to customers. Despite the consideration, the concessionaire said they are hoping that some customers would still adhere to the deadline.
Sana makapagtulungan ng customers at ang Maynilad para po masiguro pa rin yung kakayahan namin na ipagpatuloy yung operation. Challenging para sa amin na lumawig pa o humaba pa yung grace period dahil alam mo, kailangan din natin ng pondo para patakbuhin yung planta natin ngayon, bumili ng mga treatment chemicals.
Shaila Francisco, VR1 News.
Reuters says the global death toll from the COVID-19 pandemic hit the 1 million mark on Tuesday. The report says global COVID-19 deaths took only 3 months to double as infections continued to surge in several countries. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called this an agonizing milestone. He noted that although deaths have reached a mind-numbing figure, the world must never lose sight of every individual death. According to Reuters calculations based on September averages, COVID-19 is claiming the life of one person every 16 seconds. That equates to 5,400 people dying every 24 hours. And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again on tomorrow, 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News. Good evening.